everyone. My name is Kara Ingles. I am the agency strategist for Nextiny Marketing. We are a HubSpot Diamond Solutions partner. I've been using HubSpot for 5.5 years now, almost 6. It'll be 6 actually next month. And I am a nature lover and a dog mom when I am not sitting in this chair here doing a lot of fun HubSpot stuff with Bryan for our clients.
Awesome. My name is Bryan. I'm a senior account manager here at Nextiny. I've been working here for over 4 years. I kind of focus on a lot of like content, SEO, PPC, but I work really closely with our team and with our clients. Being originally from Michigan, I grew up playing hockey, so I continue to do so with the adult league hockey team. And I'm also a musician, singer-songwriter. It's a passion of mine. So excited to be here with you guys today.
Awesome. All right, we'll go ahead and kick it off from there then. So today, as you guys know, we're going to be going over how to navigate HubSpot like a pro. So this isn't so much getting into the practical use of the platform from a sales or marketing application or service application for how to implement those features for your team. It's more kind of like a setup and optimization operations play of, okay, when you're getting started with HubSpot, how can you make sure you're getting started in the right way? What are some important considerations you should make along the way, from setup to reporting to analytics to then understanding that end goal of attribution? So this is the list of things we're going to be covering today. We're going to be going through the properties, some functional use of filtering for contacts, saving custom views, and when to use lists, some of the integrations that are a really powerful part of the HubSpot platform, some of the account settings from the technical standpoint, and then also the objects and automations, some of the automation features specifically with workflows and sequences, analytics and reporting, and attribution. And at the end, we're going to be going through Q&A. We're also going to take a break between integrations and account settings to take a quick pulse to see if anyone has any questions, just so that we can keep that as interactive as possible. And if at any time you have questions you want to throw in the chat during the presentation, we've got a couple of different people manning the chat to make sure that we can get some answers to you there right away. And they'll also flag us if we need to circle back to anything. Okay, so if I have any fellow yogis out there, this is kind of like our mindset and intention for using HubSpot, how to set up for good use. We want to make sure that these are some things that as we're getting started with HubSpot, optimizing things, this is what we're keeping in mind to really make sure that we're not only set up for success, but we're also helping anyone else that's going to be using the portal beside us, alongside us, and maybe a different team or after us, really understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and really setting it up for success. So we're going to want to make sure, first and foremost, you're optimizing the HubSpot platform to fit your process. You're not optimizing your process to fit HubSpot. So if you have a clear process of how your business already functions, you want to find a way to incorporate that into the HubSpot platform, not get distracted by other features or settings that you're seeing that might be a great thing to add to your process in the future, but really go outside of the scope of what your current process is set up to do. So if you can really focus on what's my process today, how can I integrate that into the HubSpot platform, start there before you try to build out your process further using other aspects of the HubSpot platform. You also want to think about like really important but simple things like universal naming conventions. If you're doing anything from creating a list, creating a workflow, creating properties, make sure that whatever you're naming those different entities, it's something that people are going to understand later on. It's something that even cross-departmentally, the marketing team and the sales team are all going to understand what that is intended to do based on how it's structured. You're going to want to consider cause and effect, right? If you are a little bit further into your HubSpot use and creating a new property, or maybe deleting a property, or turning on a workflow, turning off a workflow, if that's going to affect other aspects of how either you're using HubSpot, some data you're trying to collect, or other teams in your company are using HubSpot, you're going to want to consider that as well as you're making those changes. And then that communication aspect of working with other teams, making sure you're all communicating really well, and considering how you're using the platform, how they're using the platform to either drive collaboration and alignment in how you're using things, or drive change to make better use of it. And then, you're also going to want to make sure whatever you're building in HubSpot, you're building for scale. HubSpot now more than ever is really positioned to help grow with your business. It's not a platform that you have to abandon as you scale. You can really scale with the HubSpot platform, but that means trying to be intentional with how you're setting things up so that your processes don't stay stagnant. They really are meant to scale with you as you grow. Okay. So we're going to start by jumping right into the HubSpot properties. Really talking about the differences between some of those default properties that exist for your different objects, like your contacts, your companies, and your deals, and then the opportunity for custom properties as well. So this kind of goes back to the point of optimizing HubSpot to fit your process, not optimizing your process to fit HubSpot. You want to figure out, okay, what's the information you need to keep track of on a day-to-day basis. You've probably got different contact properties that you need to keep track of with contact information for the contacts and companies you're dealing with. What are those basic things that probably already exist inside HubSpot? First name, last name, email, company name, city, state, all of those properties do exist within HubSpot. So going ahead and adopting those default opportunities rather than going custom for those is always great. It just keeps things clean and set up for success. And then if there's custom and unique opportunities to customize what you're doing because of the fact that you've got some specific industry information you need to add into the system, those are really great opportunities to customize your properties that you have inside HubSpot. And then you also want to make sure that you understand the unique identifiers for the different objects in HubSpot. So when you are working within HubSpot and you're fleshing out how you're going to be using contacts, if you're going to be using companies, you want to make sure you're always keeping in mind whether or not you're going to be creating duplicates in that system. So the unique identifier for contacts is that email address property. And then with companies, it's the website URL or company domain. So those are just important things to keep in mind. And something that we hear sometimes, which is why I have that fallback point there too, is sometimes when you're working with companies that maybe have a website URL or they have a URL that is representative of multiple company records, that unique identifier isn't as helpful, which is why HubSpot does also have ID records for each record as well. So at the contact level, the company record level, and the deal level, you do have contact ID, company ID, and deal ID that you can use as a backup unique identifier should you need to, if one of the default unique identifiers is not a good fit for your process. Okay, Bryan, anything to add there?
No, I think that was great.
Awesome. Okay. So again, thinking back to just being intentional of what you want to be using properties for, properties should be used for a couple of different things. So basic things like contact information, like we talked about, segmentation, again, that can be at a very basic level too, or it can be more complex as you scale. So at the simplest form, you'd want to segment out, like customers versus non-customers, which we'll get into how you can do that a little bit later. And then maybe like buyer type 1 versus buyer type 2. So if you have more than one segment of customer that you generally work with, making sure that you have systems in place to be able to categorize those people as you grow is really important. And then there's going to be certain properties for marketing information to understand maybe who's subscribed to newsletters, things like that, opt-in subscription options, sales information. There are going to be properties that exist strictly to house information that your sales team is collecting and gathering into the CRM as part of their sales conversations. And then information and properties that are default to HubSpot and already exist related to activity tracking, such as time of last session, number of pages viewed, number of form submissions, things that really help you understand not only who your leads are because of how you've categorized them, but then how active they are with the marketing and sales information that you guys are putting out there. Okay, and then I'm listing, there's a ton here, and you guys may have other ideas, and I'd love to hear them in chat of properties that you really rely on. But for me, while default versus custom is a really important topic, mostly just to make sure you're being efficient. If you decide to create a custom state property, for example, that's not the end of the world. But later on, if someone new is coming into the portal and they see the default version of the HubSpot state field and they also see the custom version, there's a chance that your data then gets put across two different properties, meaning it's inconsistently placed between one property and the other. So it's not about the fact that the default properties in cases like that are better. It's about the fact that it gives your data one place to live, which is the best place for scale and having multiple teams using a CRM. But then these default properties here, what's really great about them is they help you not only from a reporting standpoint, but then also from some of the cross-object automation that we'll get into later. So lifecycle stage, if we go back and think about the segmentation of customer versus non-customer at the most simple state, then that's what you can do using HubSpot's lifecycle stage field. So lifecycle stages are subscriber, lead, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, opportunity, and customer. There's evangelist and other as well at the far end past the end of the customer journey. And those are properties that you can use as much or as little as you want. So you may just decide that for your process, it makes sense just to use lead and customer. You just really want to keep track of who are my prospects and my leads, and then who are my customers. Using HubSpot's lifecycle stage field for that when you're on a more basic stage is great, because if you were to graduate to a more complex use of the CRM in the future, already being bought into using that lifecycle stage field and then tapping into some of those automation features that we'll talk about later is going to be great related to lifecycle stage. Same thing with persona. If we think back to segmentation of, buyer group 1 versus buyer group 2, you could create a custom version for that, and that's totally fine, but that's what the persona field is intended to do. It's a drop-down property in HubSpot that you get to customize with all of your different ideal customer groups so that you're able to segment your database by all those different groups of people that you work with. So for example, if you're working development, for example, you might work with general contractors, you might work with homeowners, you might work with architects. Being able to segment all of those different groups so that in your database you understand who are those different groups, what percentage of your database is comprised by these different groups is a really important thing to be able to set yourself up for. And then if you're using HubSpot in a sales capacity, using the contact owner field is really important because that really helps enable the accountability factor of what contacts in your database are assigned to different people on your team, and then is there any fall off? So if you're using something like that contact owner property, then when you have contacts that are unassigned, it's really clear to see that and flag, are they unassigned because they're top of the funnel and still part of the marketing process, or are they unassigned because they fall into their cracks and we need to make sure that someone gets assigned to this contact quickly. So again, just creating those visual cues for yourself so you can make sure that everything is really set up for success for all of your teams. Okay, and then one thing we've done is throughout this presentation here, we've created a little resource section for each of the topics we're going to cover. So you guys will have access to this afterwards to go through the resources that are specific to each section. Okay, so now we're going to move on to filtering contacts, saving custom views, and lists. And in this case, it's not so much about the functionality, it's about when is it most applicable to use these different features. So think about if you're just trying to quickly do a filter through your contacts for just a one-time view, like it's something that you just want to quickly analyze, but it's not something you necessarily need to return back to a later time, then you can just filter through your contacts and be done with it. But if it's something that you really feel that you would want to refer back to, maybe you're creating a custom view for contacts that are assigned to you that have a certain persona whose life cycle stage is not customer, meaning that they are a prospect still, then that's a view that you might want to look at on a weekly basis. So you could come back in and you could save that custom view so you could return to it at another time. And don't worry, we have an article linked after this that will show you how to do that in case that's something that's interesting to you. And then the difference between using those saved custom views and then those lists, which is more of a marketing function, is if you're trying to do some sort of action with the segment of your database, then that's a really good time to use the list function instead. So if you're trying to send an email to those contacts, if you're trying to report on something related to those contacts, or if you're trying to use them in a workflow, then that's a really good time to use a list instead. Okay, and there are those resources I was mentioning.
Awesome. All right, so now we'll jump into some of the software integrations. I know for those that are familiar using HubSpot, you're often, you try to use as many of the tools as you can within the software, but obviously it's not always realistic. You got to reach out to other softwares, other tools to as part of your process. So one thing that we did at Nextiny that was really helpful is we really broke down and did like an audit of our software ourselves. So we broke it down by operations, like what software are we using, to manage the day to day. What software do we use in the marketing process? What software do we use in the sales process? And so by doing that, we were able to really identify the process, right? Like understanding like where these tools fit into the different parts of our agency, the different parts of our process, and then from there being able to understand, okay, well, what tools do we need? What tools do we need, and what can we integrate with HubSpot? So HubSpot has an incredible ecosystem of apps that you guys can access. And again, we'll kind of share some of those resources at the end here with where you can find that find the app ecosystem if you guys aren't familiar already. But one thing to do is just to really understand, like, all right, what are all the software we're using? Can we integrate this natively? Or do we need to create this in a custom integration? And I think one thing I wanted to note and why I put this pro tip here is because it is really important. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should. And I'm sure many of you probably have dealt with this in a lot of cases, but and we see it all the time with clients that we work with is we acquire a HubSpot portal. And we noticed that they just went and added all the software that they use, integrated everything that had a native integration. But then you start kind of looking at it, you're like, well, we don't need all this. And in some cases it can create a mess with creating creating contacts where creating duplicates because you have two phone systems set up in there and all that. So there's just a lot of things to consider, I think, in really thinking through the process. And really keeping it simple, right? Like start with what is crucial to your marketing process, what's crucial to your sales process. And then from there, going into HubSpot, understanding what are the native integrations, what are things that are really simple, doing the one-click integrations versus having to use something like Zapier to do an integration, and how does that affect the data? So just being really intentional, I think, with your integration so that you don't create a mess down the line, I think is something that's really important. And I know just one thing I did want to mention on that is that HubSpot did create like the operation. They do have like their operations hub now, which is something that is making things a little bit easier. They do have like the PySync integrations. So I would definitely take a look at some of that too, because to the point about Zapier and PySync, Zapier it's limited, right? Like you create some of those integrations, and it's not always speaking back and forth to each other on an ongoing basis. Where with PySync and the operations hub, they are creating some integrations that allow for the data to speak back and forth. So if you guys are doing something in Salesforce, like you want that information to come back to HubSpot and vice versa. So just something to consider. I wanted to definitely touch on that in this section. Anything to add there, Kara? I can go on to the next section. Awesome. So as it relates to integrations, one thing that I spend a lot of time inside the HubSpot is their ads tool. So they have a really great ads feature that allows you to connect your Google, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and you can start to track things like, obviously impressions and clicks, but also leads that are being generated. And also if you've adopted the tool and you're closing customers, you can also track it down all the way to customers. So that's the one thing with HubSpot that I think is a really big value add when you're doing paid advertising is, typically what you do when you set up ads accounts is you set up events, or you set up conversion events through analytics or through Google Ads, and you can really only track, when someone hits on a landing page or someone picks up the phone and calls. But with HubSpot, you can now track those events to actual people and see not only when they become a lead and on the attribution side, but you can also tie that down to to their journey, right? And see how those ads are performing, once they're already in your database and are already leads for you. So we can kind of show you some of this too towards the end if you'd like, but tying this to campaigns and ad groups and keyword bids, so you can really see not only how these things are performing, but how they're performing down to specific leads and customers in your database. And one thing that they recently added was the HubSpot events, which is really valuable. So, as I mentioned before, when you're creating, when you have conversions set up inside Google Analytics or Google Ads, you're a little bit limited with the data that you're sending back to Google. So with HubSpot events, you can now set up, you can actually send that data back to Google. So when someone becomes a lead in your system as whether it's just a lead or they're a customer, you can actually send that data back to Google to say, go and find more leads like this, or go find more customers like this, down to even like the value. So if you guys are, if you've really adopted HubSpot and you're using the sales tools and you're tying like actual revenue to deals, you can actually, once somebody who comes in from paid ads becomes a customer and that there's real value tied to that customer, you can send that data back to Google and let Google optimize through smart bidding to maximize for that conversion value. So that's something that's like really valuable in the ads feature and something recent that they've added. But if you guys aren't using the ads tool currently, I definitely advise doing so. It's really simple, very intuitive, and easy to set up.
Awesome.
And so something that is a free integration with HubSpot is the Google Search Console integration, and something that we make sure is part of every portal that we set up. Search Console, like from an SEO tool, paid ads tool, it's really valuable and something that I think is really underutilized with a lot of companies. There's a lot of data, and especially recently in the last couple of years, they've really updated the interface, really easy to use. But not only from like a search perspective of being able to understand, what keywords are bringing traffic to your site and to what pages specifically, but also from like a UX, perspective. You can, it gives you really good insights on things that may be broken on your site and on specific pages, or things that are under optimized, right? So it really is a great SEO tool, and something that I think, more marketers should be focused on. But with that said, with their integration with HubSpot, it's a really seamless user experience. So once you integrate it with HubSpot, if you guys are used to looking at like landing page analytics and or website analytics, their optimization feature is tied right into the page analytics themselves, and it allows you to see, as you're looking at, let's say you're running a campaign to a landing page. So as you're looking at the different sources that are bringing traffic there and the different leads that are being generated from those sources, you can also go and then take a look at, well, what keywords are actually bringing traffic here, and how is this page ranking, and thinking through like what's the intention behind those keywords, so you can optimize the experience on the site or optimize your ads. There's a lot of benefit of keeping all that data kind of tied in one place, so that you can kind of make decisions from that. So I know, as many of you know, like those that used HubSpot in the past too, like keyword data is really limited. You can, if you're looking at organic search attribution, it only really gives you it only gives you a little bit of information, and most organic search is coming from unknown sources, right? Unknown keywords. So being able to integrate that together, being able to see what, how your pages are ranking to specific keywords, really helps understand what topics, how your website speaks, how your website is being perceived by Google, and what people are searching for to find you, so that you can optimize obviously the full experience to understand, and make sure that you're creating an experience that's relevant to the services you offer. Awesome. And then the last integration that's really important, especially if you're a sales user or have a big sales team, is integrating your Gmail inbox, your Outlook inbox. So, a lot of, obviously we're people who are sitting at our desks emailing back and forth all the time. Emails are big communication. So if you guys are interacting with prospects, interacting with and having, conversations via sales, or are working a prospect for a long time, like being able to, with one click, being able to track and log that information from your email into a contact or deal record is really crucial, and just making sure that you can keep all that communication in one place. So being able to do that is per sales user. So as like I said, if you have a big sales team, making sure that each person who is who has a sales seat or is going to be involved in the sales process can integrate their inbox. That's going to be really helpful for them moving forward, and for anybody out there who's a sales supervisor or manager who wants to understand the interactions and activities that are happening on a daily, weekly basis. And then on the other side of it is connecting the calendar. So again, really simple setup of integrating that with with the meetings tool with HubSpot. So if if you're somebody who needs to be booking time with prospects, or allow prospects to book time with you, setting your inbox up, creating the going in and setting up the meetings tool so that you can allow for people to pick time on your calendar, integrating it with your calendar so that there's no conflict of time. Like all that stuff is really resourceful and useful. And obviously keeping as many things in one place as possible is really important. You don't want to have several different tools that you're using or having to check up on. So definitely advise doing these couple of different integrations. And again, these are all integrations that are free, right? Like these are things that you have a HubSpot account tomorrow, you can get set up, and it's something that we definitely advise doing sooner than later.
And this goes back to that point about scalability as well, getting as much of your processes connected so you can understand how they're all working together and just efficiently working out of one place as much as possible. It's never going to be the case that you can solely work out of one platform. There's always going to be places where, even if your inbox is connected, you may still be active in your inbox. There may be other tools that just for, cost prohibitive, whatever the case may be, it's not going to integrate with HubSpot. But the point is here, if you're trying to set up for success, get as much of your business set up in a system like HubSpot as possible, taking care of even just these small pieces as you're getting set up to make sure that you're really seeing that full picture later on.
Awesome.
Okay. And these are those resources related to those integrations here. Questions. This is kind of our midway point here. So we wanted to go ahead and just stop for a second. If there are any questions, then we'd love to get to that before we keep going. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and keep going then for time. And if there's any that come up, we will stop and address those. Okay, awesome. Bryan, I believe this is you.
Yeah. All right. So as you're getting set up with HubSpot, obviously there's some technical stuff to get set up. We talked a little bit about connecting the integrations. Again, there's some are simple, some are more complex. And from the app marketplace, if you just go ahead and click, a lot of the times it's just one click getting it set up. Other times it may require adding in some code or setting up some Zapier PySync integrations, which we talked about a little bit. Also, just making sure that you can inject any code on your site pages. If you're using WordPress or a different CMS than HubSpot, it's important to get the HubSpot tracking code implemented so you can start getting that data in as quickly as possible. But if you're using HubSpot in the HubSpot CMS, you don't have to worry about that. You're going to get the tracking right away. Just important to make sure that you can get other software set up, like your analytics. If you have a tag manager, get that set up. Any Facebook Pixel or Google conversion tracking stuff set up. Very, very simple to do inside HubSpot. And then another thing to mention, obviously connecting your domain. A lot of companies, opt to just keep their website in a separate place like WordPress. And that's totally fine. If you're going to be using HubSpot for blog or landing pages, just making sure that you can go ahead and set that up inside HubSpot. Very simple process. They make it really easy. They have really good, just 1-2 step processes to get that set up. And then also making sure to set up your DKIM record. So your DKIM will help protect your email deliverability. So over time, as you're sending marketing emails, to protect your own domain, and so that other companies can't use it for spoofing, or so that it's yours. You're sending emails from your domain. You control your own reputation. So as you're sending these campaigns out over a long period of time, the last thing you want is for good leads, good contacts to not get your emails because they're going into spam folders, or just not getting through because your reputation was diminished. So something that's really important to set up, and something we like to remind people of. And then another thing is just notification settings. This is something that comes up a lot when we're doing like chat walkthroughs, when we're setting up like chat bots or live chat for people, because obviously that's something that you want to be notified right away so that you can respond right away. But just something to let people know, like it's per user base. So you can set up, when you go into the portal, you can set up desktop notifications. And, if you want that to show up, across all devices, you can do that on mobile and set it up. You can get email notifications. Or if you don't want, make sure you go in there and just turn all those things off. But if you have a big team, just a reminder, like that is something that you'd want to set up in your process of letting people know. If you're somebody who's manning the chat, make sure you let them know that you need to go into the notification settings and make sure that you set yourself up for success so that you can see those come through. But works the same way for form fills. If you want to know that a lead did something specifically, go ahead and set up the notification settings so that you get that information. And then, as you're setting up a portal, obviously you're going to be adding you're going to be adding different team members in. We have to think about this a lot too, because we're always adding different types of people into our portals. So for instance, we work with a dev team, and our dev team doesn't need to know what's happening on the sales side, but they do need to have access to all the CMS tools. So, making that really clear distinction of, what teams are going to be accessing the portal and what permissions do you want to give them. And again, like HubSpot has created some like predetermined kind of templates that may work for you. They may not. You may want to customize those a little bit, but a feature that's really easy. And again, that kind of rolls into the team side of things too. So if you guys have a sales team, a marketing team, a social team, like if your team, if you have a lot of people accessing HubSpot and you want to kind of control what they have access to, you can set that up through creating some of those teams, and making it easier for you to kind of give those permissions to different teams instead of just specific users.
Awesome. And then another section of the account settings is really important, is understanding the objects and automation settings, which if you want to navigate to that in your settings, you just go to settings and then objects. And then once you click on objects, you'll see the list of the different objects, which means your contacts, your companies, and your deals. There are lots of ways that you can set it up so that your objects are either siloed, meaning, contacts really only operate in contacts. They don't cross over to companies or to deals, or you can set them up that they are very cohesive so that contacts, companies, and deals all kind of interlace together. And so here's just a couple examples of how you can set that up with your settings. Some of these are turned on by default. So if any of this is something you want to check on, I would say go ahead and look at it now, because it may already be happening. And then some of these you do have to manually turn on to make sure they function this way. So the first one is customizing your objects to interact. So for example, if you have it so that your contacts and your companies are synced together, that means that every time your contact is added and they have a domain on their email address that then HubSpot's able to see as a website domain for a company, it will automatically create that company record with that domain name. So if you're B2B and that's an applicable option for you, where it would be efficient to have the company records created with the contact records, then that's a great thing that you could go ahead and turn on to streamline your process, so you're not having to manually create the contact and the company records. There's also opportunities to customize how different records appear. So for any of you that are used to using HubSpot, when you're in like a contact record or company record, you know that whatever records you're not on, but it's associated with that, so the company record or the deal record appears in that right-hand sidebar, you can now customize those cards. So you can customize what appears on those. Maybe for the deal, having the amount and the close date isn't necessarily what you would want to see, but you would want to see like the location of the deal or, some other relevant piece of information, you now have the ability to customize those things so you can see the most applicable snapshot for your business. And then when we were talking about life cycle stages earlier, and if you're in a business where having your different objects work together makes sense for you, then using something like the life cycle stage field becomes really important. Because, for example, when you have a contact and you then create a deal associated with that contact, the life cycle stage of the contact turns from lead to opportunity. And then when you move that deal for that contact into the closed won stage of your deal pipeline, it automatically marks that customer for you in the life cycle stage by moving it from opportunity to customer. So again, that's just some efficiency for you. If we're going to be segmenting our database, like we talked about earlier, from prospects to customers, this is a really streamlined way that you can do that without having to change any properties manually. Okay, and then here are some of those resources. HubSpot actually it's pretty lengthy, but they do have an account setup guide that really walks through a lot of this stuff too. So I would recommend taking a look at that if you have some time, if you're trying to get set up or just want to make sure that you're set up correctly. Okay, and then getting into the true automation functions of HubSpot, which are the workflows and the sequences. It's important to know the different roles between these two tools because it's something that they can be used interchangeably in some cases, but knowing really the goal for why you should be using these will help you more easily determine when to use these different features in the future. So workflows are first and foremost marketing automation. So in the most simple form, let's say you have a contact us form on your website and you want someone to get an email immediately after filling out that form. That's kind of like the most basic use case of a workflow, and that's the most common use is those kind of either form-based submission notification emails for the prospect to start that line of engagement, or even like a drip campaign. Like if you wanted to send out a couple emails over a couple different days, rather than having to manually go every single day and send the email, using a workflow to schedule those emails out can be a great format, but they can be used for so many different things as well. So they can be used for cleaning up your database. Again, that's something that you could do before by just, using if then branching logic, like if this property is this, make this property that. But now even with HubSpot's Operation Hub, they've unlocked more features where you can do data standardization within a workflow. So if you want to make sure all your first and last names have a capital letter, if you want to make sure that there's not like additional spaces in record single line text fields, all of those things can be cleaned up using Operations Hub in a workflow. And then they can also be used for internal email notifications if you want to ping anyone on your team based on certain actions that take place, either in your prospect's buying journey on your website. Then you can set up workflows that then send out internal notifications. So workflows from an email perspective are kind of marketing at scale, whereas sequences, which also can be related to emails, are more about sales automation. So that means you're able to send one-to-one communication in an automated way. So just like I might send an email to Bryan from my inbox, it looks just like a normal email from my inbox, very one-to-one communication style. You can do that type of setup in a sequence as part of sales nurturing. So if you were to do that through a workflow, you could use the HubSpot email marketing tool. You could select this plain text template, but it's still seen as a marketing email through the email channel. So if you're wanting to do more, cold outreach or things like that as part of your email communication when you're really trying to reach prospects for the first time, doing that kind of drip cadence where it's maybe worked in with some emails and some calls, some tasks, different things like that, using the sequences tool for that kind of sales automation is a really good fit. Okay, and then there are some of those automation resources for you guys.
Cool. So, as you guys are getting into like more of the marketing, sales, even like service related activities, obviously you guys want to be able to report and understand like how those things are working. So, HubSpot has some great analytic tools built out of the box. Obviously you can see here, there's kind of different options for service analytics, sales analytics, traffic, campaign. So definitely advise like taking a look at some of these and seeing how they can fit into your process. If it's something that, if any of these kind of out of the box reportings kind of helps you understand what you guys are doing and how things are working. definitely start here, like take a look at some of these different reports. And then if you want to one more over. But ultimately what it really comes down to is like how are you using HubSpot, right? Like I think for instance, on some of those sales reporting, like, it's all kind of built into that process, right? So if you guys are creating, if you have a really clear setup inside HubSpot where people are using the same properties and, they're using the deal pipeline, that it all in like an accurate way, it's like you'll be able to get really good insights from that if the adoption is there, right? So if people are actually using the tools the way they should, you can be able to report on those things really, really nicely. But at the same time, using some of these analytics tools will also help highlight those flaws in the process, right? You might understand quickly, like, salesperson A is doing all these activities, but they shouldn't be, because what I want them to be doing is this, or they're using these properties when I want them to be using this. And I'm seeing that they haven't done anything this week because I'm paying attention to the properties that I asked them to. And, you guys, I'm sure everyone has been in that situation before. But really it's kind of like how you guys are using the tools. So, and on the marketing side too, like we work with a lot of companies that they run a lot of like one-off campaigns. And for them, it's really important that we use the campaign reporting tools where we can, but that also means that we need to make sure that we're, tying the different marketing assets to the campaigns that are relevant, so that we can actually track some of the activities, whether it's, the landing pages or social posts that we're tracking. So really think about like how it is that you're using HubSpot, what information do you need? And then from there, kind of take a look at what analytics you have access to before you start building some of those reports. And then one thing that I wanted to kind of definitely touch on is just like the traffic analytics source report within HubSpot. So if you guys aren't familiar with this report yet, I would definitely familiarize yourself with it, because it's where we spend most of our time, right? It's the bread and butter of marketing and sales performance, of understanding how much traffic are we bringing to the website, and from what sources are we bringing that traffic, down to, the leads that we're generating from those different sources, and then the customers that we're creating from it. So, ultimately that's what it comes, like those are the things that we want to know. We want to know, like, I'm writing these paid advertising campaigns, I'm spending all this money on Google, how much of that is actually turning into business for me? Or I'm spending all this time writing blogs, like, am I actually building, is organic traffic growing? Are we creating leads from that traffic and seeing it through? So this report is really a great place to holistically really see from a bird's eye view how things are performing. And from there, it can really stem a lot of different questions. And, obviously you can start getting more granular from that. But if it's something you guys aren't using yet within HubSpot, but you guys are doing all these different activities within HubSpot, I would definitely advise starting there. And then obviously when you're getting into building dashboards and wanting to kind of create that source of truth for your company, definitely lean on some of the default dashboards that are already there. I think, they're not always going to be a perfect fit for you, or like, rarely they are. Like we often have to use default dashboards. And then we're like, yeah, I don't need this, I do need this, and kind of customize it from there. But ultimately they have a lot of really, really great resources, and a lot of really great one-off reports within their reporting library that will really help you, that you can even customize from within that. So like, I go in there all the time, and, they have like a contacts by day report, and I may edit that and say, you know what, I want to know contacts from this list per day, and also this source filter. So like you can do a lot of really cool customization, but again, obviously you don't want to just like jump into reporting. I think really think about what it is, like how you're using HubSpot, the different activities that you guys are doing, and then from that really develop a plan of like, okay, how do we report on this, and why is the reporting important, right? Like why, like, is this something that is actually going to create actionable insights for me? Or am I just reporting on this to because I like seeing a line go up and down every now and then? It's like really important to pay attention to the things that are going to actually drive like results for your business, and focus on that. And then here's just some resources related to that we'll share with you guys. Awesome. All right, and then on the attribution side of things, so obviously when we're from the marketing perspective and even a sales perspective, we all want to know kind of like where our leads are coming from. We spend a lot of money, a lot of time a lot of resources on generating these leads. So obviously, understanding where they originally came from, whether it's from our paid ads, from the blog, from an email campaign, from some partner that we're working with that's providing leads. Like, we really want to know, like, obviously, how many leads are we generating, what's happening with them. And so one thing I wanted to point out, and something that I think a lot of people overlook, if they once they get to the traffic source analytics report, you can drill down into all those different sources too. So if you're looking at, if you're looking at original search, if you're looking at organic social, you can click in further and understand, like, all right, well, what channels are, what actual social platforms are bringing traffic in, and which traffic, or what channels are actually bringing leads in. So being able to understand, like, well, if I'm spending all this time on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, it's like you may learn quickly that, like, we're getting all these leads from Facebook, even though traffic is crazy from Instagram. Like that's information and insight that's really resourceful, and data that I don't think a lot of people realize they have access to. And then the other thing too is also, like, is on the original source side and attribution, is, I think, we love to know original attribution. We love to know where people came from from their first touch. But, obviously marketing is much more complex than that. And there's so many activities happening all the time. It's kind of like we kind of put prospects through this, like, whirlwind of our marketing funnels. And I think it's important to understand what that multi-touch attribution is. So for, HubSpot has for some more of, like, their advanced packages, you are able to report on some of that multi-touch, but even just being able to see through, like, looking at a handful of contact records and kind of doing a reverse engineer of their journey, and understanding, if somebody came originally from paid ads and then we hit them with an email, like a couple email campaigns that brought them back to the site. But what really brought them back was that retargeting campaign through Instagram, that, like, they saw the ad and came back to the site and picked up the phone and called. Like, all of those things are really important, and I would argue just as important as original source. So able to, like, really understand fully, like, and yes, original source is important, but also things like latest source is also really important, and you have access to that data inside HubSpot. And then the other side of it too, we, as much as we are digital marketers, and we're always thinking about, like, Facebook ads or Google search ads, or the organic search that's coming in, like, we're always kind of focusing on the digital side of things. You guys are obviously work with audiences that sometimes love direct mail campaigns, or you may be working with a third-party source that is, going to be pushing leads to you, and they may be sending out email campaigns on your behalf. Being able to create some of those custom URLs inside HubSpot is a great way to track that attribution from those different efforts too. And if you want to even get a step further and more advanced, like, you may want to even consider adding something like CallRail, which is like a call integration software that we use that allows us to, from digital, like, when people pick up the phone and call, it allows us to understand what source brought them to the site to call. What brought them to the site when they picked up the phone and called. It lets us know that person came from paid search, that person came from organic. So again, being able to understand that attribution, some people get really obsessed over that, and we do too, because we love understanding where things come from. But ultimately, it really goes back to, what do you need the attribution for, right? Like, you can go crazy and add tracking numbers on all of your different trucks if you guys are contractors, but what do you need? Like, what do you need the attribution for, and what decisions will you be making from that? I think will really help you understand, like, how granular you want to get with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And then again, there are those resources there. So that is the end of our presentation for today. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat. And then we also do have a demo portal that we could hop into if anyone has anything that they specifically wanted to look at in real time based on what we went over today, or just even a question you have. We can transition away from the PowerPoint into that to walk through a few things in real time in this time that we have remaining here.
Awesome.
Okay. If there aren't any questions, that's okay too. We do have some further resources here. So kind of talking back to that first point about, like, the property setup here, I have a spreadsheet It's just kind of like preview of it here that can really help you figure out and set yourself up for success in making sure that you are set up with your default properties and your custom properties, and you've got kind of like a source of truth for that. So if you want a copy of that, just shoot me an email and I can send you a copy over. I'm going to stop there for a second because I see that Gretchen asked a questions. So any suggestions for where to look for consultants to help with HubSpot as we look to replace our RevOps analyst and HubSpot admin? Well, Gretchen, you could work with us. Not to plug too hard here, but we are, like I said in the beginning, Nextiny, we're a HubSpot Diamond Solutions partner, going through this process of helping people audit how they have HubSpot set up, or figuring out how to help them move forward and set up for the first time is what we specialize in. There is, of course, an entire network of awesome solution partners. So if you look up HubSpot Solution Partner Directory, you can definitely take a look there to find someone that you think would be a great fit to work with you. And then, yes, Tammy, I saw you mention that we're going to share the slide deck. Yes, absolutely. We can send that over. I know we put a lot of links in here, and that was for the intention that, what we put together is very conversational, and it's topics that we're giving you such a summaried view of, but there's so much more to practically understand, and there's no replacement for walking through those things in Portal. So any questions you have, any links that you can get access to, I think that'll add a lot more clarity to the things that Bryan and I went over today. Okay. That's okay. We love newbies. You are coming into HubSpot in a great time. It's, when I started using HubSpot 6 years ago, it really was purely a marketing tool. It's now grown into an entire business suite platform. And so it's a great time to be onboarding into HubSpot. So welcome to the HubSpot family. And then another thing that'll help is on the resources side, HubSpot has these project checklists. Edith, I see you asked a question about a deal. I'll answer that in 1 second. And I'll actually just go ahead and show you what those project templates look like, because I think they're so great. So if I come over here and I click on projects right here, there's all these templates that exist for general setup. And you can see if I click on this task, for example, it links to all of this information of how HubSpot is going to explain you how to do it. So not only are they saying, hey, this is something you need to do, they walk through some practical application of how you should do it, which I think is a great advancement in this product's system here. This didn't used to exist. And so to your question, Edith, about what a deal is. So a deal, and again, I'll stay in Portal here just so that we can look at this more practically. If I come over here to sales and then to deals, you have the option to build out this pipeline here. So a deal is almost like if part of your sales process, there's like a proposal phase. So it goes from a contact who's interested in maybe your product or your service to some sort of tangible conversation happening for you to work together. So you're going to sell them either a product or a service. That is an opportunity for you to win new business. And so that is a deal. So that allows you to go from working off of a contact record. You can see I have myself in here as a contact. Let's say I'm a prospect for Nextiny in this case, and I wanted to do business with Nextiny. The moment I go from just prospect who maybe downloaded a brochure or something like that to scheduling a meeting with Gabriel, our CEO, to then have a meeting or have a conversation with intent to partner with them and to give business to them, that's when creating a deal is important so that you can track those differentiations in where people are in the process, but then also, where your different sales opportunities are in your pipeline, because your sales process likely has many steps too. You have people that come in and have just scheduled a new appointment. Then you have people that you've vetted, so they might be considered qualified to buy. After an initial consultation call, you might then have a quote that you send to them. And so, you can not only have that differentiation between like, who are my prospects that are further along in the sales process and who are my customers, you can also see specifically where they are in the process if you're using this deal pipeline here. Yeah, I would say, the deal is the specific entity, but yes, it is the deal pipeline here is a robust version of how you can flesh out your sales process in HubSpot. And you can also edit these stages. So if I come up here to board actions and then edit stages, I can customize this to fit my process. So don't feel like your sales process needs to have, 8 steps. Not everyone's process is that complicated. Some people's process is more complicated. So again, talking about customizing HubSpot to suit your process. If your business has 3 steps in your sales process, then you would just come through here, customize something like this to better reflect what your process looks like. Okay. Another resource that's really important too, kind of back to Bryan's point earlier about those integrations, is the app marketplace. So if you come up here to this little storefront icon here, and then you click on app marketplace, this is where you're going to find all of those different integration partners that may help you level up how you're currently using HubSpot today. So if you wanted to do any of that call tracking that Bryan was talking about earlier, you could look for that tool that we talked about called CallRail, where you can not only see how people are interacting with your website in the traditional sense of filling out forms, visiting pages, but then also if they're calling you from your website in lieu of filling out a form, integrate a tool like CallRail so you can get the attribution for those types of activities as well. This marketplace here is great because it's not just if you know the name of an app, search for it here. You can also look for, if you're like, okay, I want some marketing things here. I want to know what integrations are going to be really great for e-commerce, because that's something I do. You can see that there's Shopify integrations, there's Square integrations, lots of different things. One e-commerce plug here is HubSpot does now have their HubSpot payments platform as well. So that's something you may consider if you are in e-commerce, just to, again, streamline and make efficiency in how you're using the tool. And then, of course, there's the knowledge base. Today's presentation, all the links that we've included in here for the most part are from HubSpot's knowledge base, even as people that have been using the HubSpot product for, 4 or 5 years now. We rely on the knowledge base constantly because it's a good resource for when we're helping people set up HubSpot for success, just so that they have items to refer back to, just kind of like we supplied with you guys with today. And then even for us, HubSpot's always making simple tweaks to the platform to make it a better and more powerful tool for everyone. They're also always rolling out new features and things that make the knowledge base a relevant source of truth for people, even if you're just getting started or if you've been using it for a long time. So definitely would recommend checking out their knowledge base. Okay, that was it for us today. We definitely have time to take another question if you guys have it. If not, we'll make sure to send out these resources so that you have them to refer back to. All right. Thank you so much for joining today, guys. Yeah. It was great to have you, and we look forward to having you at future events.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.